Okay, we're going to get started. And if you would just put yes, consistently, Carly says, yes, only a couple of days. Good. Yes, I've written morning pages almost every day. 1 day of morning pages. Good. Yes, yes. And no one says to me, hey, I want to know more about morning pages. So,
Mm.
uh, I'm going to proceed with this as if everybody knows what morning pages is. I'll just go through it really quickly. What I want to do today is I want to show you why you might want to write memoir. And I don't mean a memoir, but memoir in general. And memoir in general includes anything that goes from your true story. So it could be essays, it could be poetry, it could be flash memoir, short stories that are done based on your life, all of those things. And so anything that is memoir, it doesn't have to be a book. However, writing for over an extended period of time, or most especially writing a book where you're using structure to write it, can be there's a lot of self-actualization that can happen along with that. And as someone who was brought up through the 70s and 80s, that is one of the things that really helped me was writing. And just to go briefly through my story for just 1 second here, I got sober because I was writing. And at first I didn't write morning pages. I just, hey, Virginia, I wrote, I just wrote journal. So journaling is good too. And then I graduated to morning pages after I met Julia. And then that helped me get sober because I began to realize that maybe, just maybe, finding a new bar to go to was not the answer. Maybe no bar was a more of an answer. And later, when I had a really, it was like being self-employed, but it was a business where I sold the work of writers and artists. I was like an agent, and I sold it to the ad agencies and to large Fortune 500 corporations in Chicago. And at that time, I remember I loved the job, and then I didn't love it so much. After I got sober, I thought, oh my gosh, I want a job with more meaning. But what? I had zero idea of more, what that job would look like. And it gets especially hard to make changes when we're making a lot of money. Okay. And that we'll talk about that in a minute, because we get into a comfort zone. And I'm going to ask you some questions about this to, you'll take out a piece of paper and work with this, but I'm telling you my story first so that you can tune into yours. So at this time, I had zero idea how to change it. I knew that I wanted to change it. And what I started to do at this point was I met Julia Cameron. I knew her actually. And she had written a manuscript called Healing the Artist Within. And I told her, if you've been with me a while, you've heard the story, but I'll say it again. I said to Julie, oh my God, I couldn't do a creativity workshop. I'm not creative. But I could read. So I would love to read your book. And she brought it over that night in the snow in Chicago. And it was a typewritten Kinko's black bound manuscript called Healing the Artist Within. Of course, this would become The Artist Way, which became a bestseller across the world. And but we didn't know that then. And she asked me, unlike a lot of people, she asked me a lot about myself at the time. And she decided that I was spending all my time being with artists, promoting artists, but not being one myself. And she said, oh, I think you might be a shadow artist. I even told this story once before, but it's in the morning pages thing that we did. And I said, oh, a shadow artist. Well, a shadow artist, as women, maybe men know this too, we really know how to shadow people. We learned in the 70s, well, I was born in the 50s, you get married and you are a good wife, then you put your husband forward. You get married, you're a good mother, you put your children forward. And so I understood what a shadow artist was, but what I didn't understand was that I was still doing that. Here I had a career, I was making good money, and I thought, I'm not shadowing anyone, but I was. Instead of becoming an artist myself, which appealed to me and which there was a part of me wanted to do, I didn't think I could ever be an artist. And so what Julia Cameron prescribed at that time was that I go out and I take all kinds of art classes, no matter what they were, and not for a grade. She specifically forbade me from going for a grade. Now that's really hard for some of us, myself included. But that was the trick, was to just do things, because in my life, since I'd been an adult, I had never done anything just for the fun of it. Everything had been for my career or for some kind of a goal oriented thing in my 20s. And then just doing that for the grade, that led me to writing. And that led me to a class where the woman said, what's wrong with you? Why can't you write? She held my writing up in the front of the class. That kind of killed it for a little bit. I would have drank margaritas, but I was sober by then, so that ruined that trip. Anyway, but the point was, when I did get back to writing, I got back to writing poetry and memoir. And I realized that the stories about myself were helping me to see, and I'll get into this in the slide presentation, but helping me to see in a different way. And that there was something that about it that was helping me, not only had transformed my life into getting sober, but it would eventually change my career to one that I had no idea existed. And it's one that I'm still doing today and that I still love, because it was more connected to who I really am. So what I'm saying is, writing about ourselves can connect us to who we are authentically. It can get us to our truth and so forth. So now, okay. So I'm calling this From Morning Pages to Memoir. And when you write memoir, life gives you metamorphosis, which is transformation, but I wanted an M word so I could have some alliteration and meaning. Okay. So just going on to this, when you get into the artist way, when you start writing memoir, when you work with these ideas, you get what Julia Cameron, who wrote the book, The Artist Way, called creative recovery. And when she told me to go out and take different classes without worrying about a grade, she wanted me to start my creative recovery. And so I thought, I'm just going to start here with creativity. What is it? And it's defined as generating or recognizing ideas, alternatives, possibilities that may be useful in solving problems, communicating with others, and entertaining ourselves and others. And just for a second, and then I'll go back to this, two short stories. One is when I was teaching the Artist Way, after about 10 years, maybe it was when Terry was in there, I was standing in front of the class and I said inside of myself, I wonder why this Artist Way thing works so well. Because by then I had 10 years of watching people writing morning pages and really learning a lot from that process, and really leaving the Artist Way and transforming, just like I transformed my career and my sobriety and all kinds of things. And all of a sudden, there was a whole group of people, at least 50 of them, at the Bodhi Tree on Melrose and West Hollywood. Their faces, like a science fiction film or some kind of film, morphed into what they must have looked like as children. So their adult faces, these jaded adult LA, no, we know everything in LA faces, that are often conquering the world, they all transformed into who we were as children, and then they transformed back again. And I took that as my answer. I thought, that's what we need to do. That's why it works, is when we quit our conditioning, when we quit some of the things that we learned in school, which serve us. You need to be conditioned so you get along in groups. We needed to learn the rules and whatever. And this is a second short story about my niece. When she was 4 years old, she worked with my sister to write me a book. And it was so cute. It was Samantha the salmon and something about an ant and a fox. And she did all the illustrations in crayon. And she did these cute stories. And I was we live 3,000 miles away. I was really delighted with this. About 4 years later, I was speaking to her on the phone, and she was in the 4th grade at that point. And I said, "Oh, Caitlin, are you still writing?" That's her name. And she giggled. And she said, "Oh, Aunt Kelly, I'm not a writer." And that really hit me, because I thought, that's what I had done. That's what we've all done. And so those two events helped me to understand what it means to recover our creativity, that what it means to recover our creativity is to recover the flow so that we're better actually at solving problems. And NASA once did a study, and they found that children had 98% more creativity than they would have by the time they were 20. It had gone down to 2%, or it was 96% more. It was a lot. Okay. So I think that's what's fun. And creative recovery is how you turn what you've lived into something that can live beyond you. I think that's what memoir writing is. Some of you have children, you already know the thrill. I don't, but you know the thrill of turning people into something. And so we've worked with morning pages. I think if you do nothing else and you just work with writing 3 pages, stream of consciousness, first thing in the morning, you dump all that gunk that's in your head when you wake up, and the wonderful stuff too, the dreams, onto those 3 pages. It teaches you how to be into flow. It teaches you how to do a lot of those things. So as I just said, they recover your creativity by clearing out the clutter. That includes your fears, your resentments, put your to-do list, anything that keeps you from hearing what we're going to talk about in a minute, which is your higher self or higher creativity. And this is important. Keep them private. You're not writing for other people at this point, and that's very important. So what morning pages do is they put you in what I'm going to call creative recovery. And you start getting some insights. But this is not for anyone else. If you want to inspire others, educate others, or entertain others, you don't want to do that with your morning pages, because those are private. You have to have a place where you're uncensored. And as Rusty was saying, who's one of my co-hosts here, that it's never about sharing that, because you need to have total privacy, especially nowadays when people are quick to censor. So that's why I'm saying you need to write memoir, because memoir is how you turn what you've lived, what you've been mining, what you've been, like the gold that you might find in your morning pages. You're going to turn it into something that, if you want, you can share with others, something that you can leave behind. Okay. So what morning pages also does that gives you a head start on memoir writing is it gives you consistency, because inconsistency is rooted in fear. When we're afraid, I love what Julia said. She said, procrastination is not laziness, it's fear. and you develop your habit of writing, you develop your ability to write about your inner world, which all of memoir is about. And then what Morning Pages tune you to the same creative frequency that Michelangelo, Rumi, and Georgia O'Keeffe listened to. And that is themselves. They began, and I'll get to the next thing that they were listening to, because once you start, you don't have to censor yourself. You can at least be honest with yourself. If you're pissed, you can be honest. You can say that in your Morning Pages. Whatever your true feelings are, you can just dump them on there. And also, it's on page 161 for those of you who have worked with the Morning Pages and The Artist's Way. It tells you what to look for after you've written Morning Pages for a while and you see your patterns and triggers. You can see your fears, and also you start listening to your intuition. And this next is the number one connection that it's a gift that we get from the Morning Pages. And that is, we start quieting our big egos. Like, ego is a really cool thing. There's no problem with some ego. But sometimes when our egos think we know everything, it just blanks out other things. Now, Andre, we have a French person in here, Guédet, said that art is a collaboration between God and the artist, and the less the artist does, the better. We say God can be anything you want, but just something that is bigger than you. It can be the collective intelligence, it can be the Buddha, it can be the universe, just something, so that you don't think you're the biggest thing around. That's your ego telling you that, and it will block out any help you get from known and unknown sources. So by writing Morning Pages, getting into the flow, you're co-creating with something that is bigger than yourself. So consistency, I don't know why that didn't work here, but we talked about consistency. It gives you a connection to self and a connection to the higher self, and those all overlap. Okay, so writing Morning Pages wakes you up, but writing memoir grows you up. If you don't write memoir out, which is for other people, there's less of a chance that you'll make meaning out of what you've written, that you probably won't reflect on what you mean and what you're trying to say. You're unaware of the steps of how you've transformed in the past. Like, how did I get sober? And once I got sober, what were the stages of the journey that I went through? And you're more likely to get stuck longer period of time in life and your art. But if you do write memoir, and by memoir, again, essays, poetry, anything that is taken from your life, you move from what happened, what you thought at that time. That is such a big part of writing memoir. And you rewire your story from the inside out. You gain insights, you gain inspiration, and a path to self-actualization. And you're more likely to create a more authentic vision for your future. And that is one of the things that helped me figure out what I didn't want, what I did want, and then just open up to, it might not even look like what I think it should look like. And it's you're able to take more effective action to create what you want next, which in memoir, we call it the object of desire. So now let's talk about how this actually works. We're going to work with Elizabeth Gilbert's Eat, Pray, Love. Hopefully most of you have heard of this, but even if you hadn't, it's a wonderful book, and it was also a movie. And I will say, most people did not like the movie as well as they liked the book. And you're going to find out why in a second. Because in a movie, you can't show what they call the inner subjective writing. You can't show what the person is thinking at the time. Now, if it's not a true story, maybe you put the person in a room with someone and they'll tell the person what they're thinking. But mostly that's only in memoir. You get to see what they're thinking as they do something. All objective is like writing a news story. The person did this, the person did that. This happened, then that happened. I went on a date and I looked across the table at the guy sitting across from me and I said, hello. And in my head, I'm thinking, oh my God, he must be at least 20 years older than his picture. That's the joy of writing memoir. The subjective is what I'm thinking about it. So now we look at the book of Eat, Pray, Love, and we look at the outer story. She might have written this in her morning pages. I'm having a relationship with this pizza. Now, this is in the book, though, almost an affair. Every bite is a tiny orgasm of joy. The dough, so warm and soft, the tomato sauce, so sweet, the mozzarella, so fresh. She's telling us what she's doing, what she's experiencing. And you might say this is what you could see. Rusty said earlier today, it's what you can see in the movie camera. And she's saying out loud, I'm in love. I'm in love with pizza, with Italy, with myself. Or actually, this is what she's thinking and feeling. It's not what she's saying. I'm in love. I'm in love with pizza, with Italy, with myself. So she's eating the pizza, talking about how great it is, but she's really thinking this inside, which is, I'm happy and content in the present moment. So Elizabeth Gilbert is revealing her inner state, whatever joy or presence or self-love, or if it was another kind of scene, it might her sadness. It doesn't matter what feelings you show, but you can show them, or you can show what's going on inside of the person. And it's what she's seeking. And I used to think, then she lands on meaning. This is what I'm talking about writing memoir. She lands on this. I used to think I needed a man to be happy. Now I'm realizing I can feed myself, literally and spiritually. And this is a memoir move where you're connecting your outer action to your inner transformation. And the pizza becomes a metaphor for that. So we're going to play with this tonight. So if you would take out a piece of paper, we're just going to get warmed up. And you'll get a chance to share what you write, or you don't have to share. You can always pass. But I want you, if you could, make a list of 5, you can stay with eating, 5 times you've eaten at a meal with other people or in another country, something where you're eating, and see if you can find 5 incidents that might be interesting. If you're already working on, hi Mandy, if you're already working on a memoir, it could be a scene. I mean, it may not be currently a scene out of your story, but you can pick a scene out of your story where you might be at a meal with people. Fiction is the same way. You can make it up a scene, draw from your real life. So just a list of 5 things. I remember having coffee with this guy I just gotten picked up by in an Italian coffee shop. Okay, that was pretty cool. That might be one on my list. I remembered the first date I had with my husband, Russ. I dated for 57 years, so I have a lot of dating stories. 57 years, and I met him, and I that would be another conversation that I have. Okay, what are some? Also remember, not just any Thanksgiving, but one particular Thanksgiving or one particular Rosh Hashanah or Christmas, holiday, Halloween, where you're actually talking to someone or having something happen, an event. Okay, now one of the wonderful things, which is why Rusty and I both work in groups, like to work with groups, is we may not be able to think of anything. But if we're in a group and we hear someone else's idea, it's not that we're stealing the idea, it can just trigger another idea in our mind. So when people work in clusters, the whole cluster rises. You know, there's just so many more things that happen. So who would be willing to share one meal on your list, and then I'll get some other people to share a meal on your list. Just raise your hand. If you raise your hand down at the bottom there, and then come up. Yes, Johnny Greco, you raised your hand at the bottom. I saw Johnny Ray, but just raise your hand at the bottom. Johnny, what was one of the things on your list? One of the Johnnies.
Having Thanksgiving dinner at my junior year of college and telling my parents I'm dropping out of med school in front of my aunt and uncle. Or I'm not going into med school. I'm dropping out of pre-med. I'm
Okay,
dropping out
good
of
one.
college.
Good one. And you say in memoir, does it have to be exact? You know, Johnny, what you did that worked is you picked one dinner, one memorable conversation. So it'll be easier for you to write. It's not all Thanksgivings. You know, you could rely on that for other narrative, but no, then you can write with that. Thank you. Okay. Johnny, Ray, did you not share your hand? And then Susan is on deck.
After my mom's service, December 5th, 2024, I had everybody who was at the service come over for Salvadoran pupusas and pan dulce, which is sweet bread and coffee, which is a standard meal in El Salvador, especially after a death.
Love it. And you are working on your memoir. So let's see how specific you can get with the scene. Susan. Thank you, John.
The thing that flashed into my mind is that when I was 30 years old and I'd split up with my husband, I was single parent to a 5-year-old son, 6-year by the time of that. I decided one time in my life, I'm going to go to Paris. And I'd take him with me. And I went to Paris and stayed in what would now be called an Airbnb the first night before I visited. And the next morning, and we would be polite, I was very controlled. But the next morning, when you came down and was sitting there, what they served you was cafe latte with it poured out of 2 different bowls, the pot and the coffee and in a glass. And I thought I'd died and gone to heaven. It was so beautiful. And of course, for my son, they poured it was hot chocolate and everything. And both of us thought, we'll just live here the rest of our lives. That we never have to get up and leave. So it was, and to this day, I have cafe latte in the morning. So there.
I would love it, and you may not remember it all, but if you focus on the scene where you're talking to your husband, and meaning you spend a little time there, what was the dialogue, what was said there, and what makes a scene? Anyone remember? I mean, I know some of you do because I just talked about it in Rusty's class. What makes a scene?
No, it wasn't with my husband. We'd split up. It was with my son.
Oh, okay. There wasn't a meal, but the meal where you split up with your husband would be good too.
Oh, that's a whole other question. Yeah.
Okay.
That
if there's
that
no
was,
conflict, you can write that, but if there's no conflict, it's weird, but it's harder to write. So
yes.
So if you can pick one with a conflict means opposing forces. You want one thing and someone else. So it could even be where your son decides he wants something else to do something else afterwards, and you want to do one thing.
Okay.
Conflict doesn't have to be big. So yes, just to give you something to write about. Okay, and Colleen.
Oh, your point about we can't write the same thing. When Johnny was sharing, I thought, oh, I remember when I was tailgating at my mother's wake. I was tailgating by mistake, but there I was.
Great.
So it turned light a very serious situation.
Yes, so here's what we're going to do. You're going to have about 10, 12 minutes. And what I'd like you to do, and I'm going to write this in the chat, who, what, where, why, when, and how. Those are what they call the left brain or your rational brain. That what takes you into this, what they call the objective. It's what a journalist is supposed to do. They're supposed to give you the facts. And then I'm also going to say, if you want to, you can also work with I smell, I hear, I see, I feel, I touch, I imagine. And that's also in there. And that takes you into your more creative side of your brain. Writing needs both the right brain and the left. Well, they don't call it that anymore, but it needs the sides of your brain that are very rational, and like math girl can, Colleen, math girl can do that stuff. And then math girl has to get some of the right side back in. Now, we were looking at some of Elizabeth Gilbert's writing today. And here's another thing you can do is write in the present tense. So I smell, I hear, I see. If you write that way instead of long ago and far away, I used to do this, you're going to be able to write more, more in the moment, and there might even be more reflection and more insights that come out of it. Okay. You may say to me, Kelly, I don't remember everything that was said at this meal. So you might have to play a little, make up some stuff that would be likely. In other words, you know, I don't remember if my mom said this exact thing, but she always said things like this. Or work out on the page and say, I can't think of anything. I can't think of anything else to write. What else happened to that day? What did the room look like? Just look back at the prompts and see if you can expand on it a little bit.
No, we lost Kelly, so she'll be right back. Her internet's probably going a little crazy. So, talking about a scene and things that happen in a dinner. It was a Christmas dinner at my sister Charlotte's, who would host Christmas dinners like she usually would. And it just happened to be after I was all fired up from receiving counseling from the Sexual Assault Center. And I went and said, we've got to like talk about the skeletons in the closet. And of course, she wanted to spank me. And I was like 28, 29. So there's a definite scene right there. Christmas when I was 29, mentioning about the skeletons in the closet, about the sexual abuse. And she wanted to turn me over her knee, her exact words.
I would just add, if you were writing the scenario that thank you, Rusty, that she just said, you might want to write in there, oh, I don't know if and this came up in your head, I don't know if I want to share this. You can just write that right down. Whatever's in there, whatever's in there, write about a particular thing and allow your own mishigas. See, I'm not even Jewish, but I'm celebrating today, Rosh Hashanah. Okay, with a Jewish Yiddish word. It's Yiddish. Okay, on your mark, get set. Take out your pen and paper. Write the name of the meal at the top and just start there. What we're going to do is we're going to break up in 2 rooms. Rusty will take one of the rooms and I'll take the other room. And we're just going to read what we wrote. It's very important in rough drafts and the early stages of writing, the kinds of feedback we give. So it's not a critique kind of feedback ever. It's more like what's impacting us, what's gaining our attention, what is it that we want to ask, that we still want to know, that maybe they've said somewhere else, but you know, we're excited to hear more about. What are we excited to hear more about? So in other words, we want this through our feedback to generate more writing. And we don't have a ton of time, so it'll probably just be a couple comments from the room, so you can get used to doing that, and I'll help with it, and Rusty will help with it. Okay, so how did it feel to listen with the idea that you're responsible for that? Did you learn anything by listening to anyone else? Just curious. Johnny, did you have something to say?
Yes, having taken classes with you for so long and having other instructors in the last 20 years, what I found interesting in the position that I was kind of in with Anna and Carly was I had to sharpen my listening so that I wouldn't miss anything that was being shared, which made what was awesome. Like Anna made my mouth water when she was describing a Portuguese pastry. And then my imagination was blown open when Carly was sharing her list. And I was thinking about so many directions that Carly can take with her, each item on her list, because they were fascinating. So it made me look at myself and kind of add those kind of details into my own writing.
Yes, I learned so much from listening and freezing as I keep doing, but I learned in the Zoom, I learned so much. And I like that you had a chance where you had to listen more because you are, because you become responsible. And there's something to be said for listening and really hearing and thinking about what's working. I
Yeah.
love what you said, Johnny, about, then you can repeat it. You can do what's working too. Anything else about being the listener that any insights or things you can call out okay, how did it feel to read it out loud, what you were writing, and to hear back? Anyone want to talk about anything that you discovered from doing that process? And I know a lot of you have done it before, but anything today that you noticed about yourself as you did it?
I find it odd that people find anything remotely interesting about my writing because it's impossible to write for me. And I feel like I have nothing to say and it's just long winded of nothing. Like I never got to the part of the tea. I was writing about afternoon tea, never got to the tea. So I always find that odd.
Well, I know from having listened to your work a lot in the past that's your inner critic saying that, because then when we listen, we're hearing stuff that is bringing us into your writing. Not everything is, and when we write like this, they're all first drafts, so not everything is perfect. Anything we say here, like we ask questions about, we just want more, and we're trying to think of directions to develop in, but it's not like school. So and your critic is up sometimes too, and then you keep showing up, you keep showing up, you keep showing up, and now we have Math Girl.
Yeah,
And
the only purpose of a first draft is to exist.
yeah, I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
Anyone else discover anything from reading? I discovered, I always discover what people are laughing at or what they relay back is the most impactful. Sometimes I'm surprised by that. Was anyone surprised by what others, actually Colleen is saying that. I'm surprised when people can relay things back. It's interesting. But anything in your own piece that surprised you that was other people found was interesting and you thought was just not the most interesting thing you'd written about?
I found it very refreshing that I was reading to two completely new people to me that had never heard any ounce of my story. And even though I didn't get a lot of laughs or big giant ahs or anything, I did peek up a couple of times, and just to see a reaction in the eyes was refreshing, because I do that when I read. I will sit there and have conversations with I can't believe she just did that. Oh my God. What? Like I have my own conversations with myself about the author's writing that I'm reading. And so it was interesting that I didn't have any kind of filter or any kind of anything reading to Carly and Anna, because I don't know them at all. It's almost like going on stage with a brand new audience, not the same one that was the matinee. You know, it's like,
Nice.
it just was refreshing.
Cool. Anyone else?
Um, I I just was very happy to make Virginia laugh. I don't think I've seen Virginia laugh so hard.
Oh,
So
believe me,
that
we
was
heard it
that
in our
was a
room.
surprise.
We heard it in our room too, that she was pretty
Yeah.
excited about something, Caroline.
That was Caroline. Well, and it was so funny because can I say, Virginia, what you wrote about with the one? Okay, because Virginia wrote about she had to cook meals and she would cut off the leg of a goat that was hanging there. And Mandy and I, who are pretty urban, we were like, Mandy had written about a sweet potato, for dinner. And so this difference between cooking for 8 people, cutting the leg off the goat, actually cooking it. Of course, we're in different environments, and it's like going to a foreign land for me to hear about someone's life, and the differences between it. So that's what listening got me today. So anyone else? Terry, how is it to be writing again in one of my, and how was it? Were you in Rusty's group? How was it?
No, I haven't really been writing with a group for a while. Like, so,
Yeah.
I mean,
How was it?
reading with a group for a while. Yeah, it was, at first I didn't really think there was anything I wanted to write about, but, and what other people were writing might have caused a little bit of like, oh yeah, I remember that story. I remember that. Like all of a sudden it came from like, nah, can't think of anything, to like a continuing sense of like, oh yeah, I could write about that in Italy with this and that. And so it kind of brought back all those ideas, the value of working together and reading together and listening together and writing together
Mhm.
can spur your imagination so much better.
I really appreciate you bringing that in. And I think
Mm-hmm.
I would add, just to go along with today's theme, not only your imagination, but your ability to reflect on your own actions. I don't know if anyone else, but this is an example. I wrote when I was 10 years old, I wrote about that. And the way I thought when I was 10 was different. The way I would tell the story is different today. And what I think writing memoir can do is strip away, or at least help you see, the rationalizations, the denial, the self-sabotage in I'm not saying what you were saying, Terry. I'm adding on to this to go with the theme. And in that, it's very exciting to me, because that's how I quit drinking. That's how I ended up building a career that seemed to come out. And I mean, I'd never heard of doing this for a living. And then later I wrote about dating and how I wanted to start getting, and that made me realize I wanted to get married. And then I realized that I was going to start dating to find a husband. And all of that came through writing and seeing how the stories I tell myself. Oh my God, does anyone have any? I don't know if you noticed that today we're writing about food, but you can really tell yourself a story that's not the truth. And when you start writing memoir, you start to see, oh my God, I can't believe I used to tell myself that. Or, that's the way I used to see it. And now I'd give anything to go cut the leg off the goat and cook for those 8 people just one more time. I mean, I don't know, or you find out what you were thinking, how you were seeing the world, and it can help you create a new future as well. That was the point I want to get to.
I don't know if anybody's read Elizabeth Gilbert's new book, All the Way to the River.
Rusty did? Who
No.
did? Someone I
You
talked to
want to
today.
talk about raw.
Raw. I
Talk-
heard.
It's like you got to close it up sometimes, it's like,
Yeah.
okay, I'll see you tomorrow. It's raw.
Well, I love that kind of writing, because we have to have people we trust, I believe, and say it out loud sometimes. I mean, there's writing it down in our morning pages or in a journal, and then there's being witnessed by people who are like, yeah, thanks for sharing that with me. I'm really glad you could share that with me. And I feel like that's what Elizabeth, I mean, this is her third her third memoir.
Yeah, and
isn't it?
I've read everything that she's written, and she's never been this truthful. And it keeps coming out. It's like, oh, I want to say it this way, but this isn't the way it was. So
I love that.
now tell you what happened, what really happened. And she can't cover her own self up. You know, she's a part of it. She's a part of madness, you know, she's a part of life.
Yeah, and she's recovering now through doing that writing. From what I understand, I haven't read this last book, but that she's recovering from addictions, as
Mhm.
well as people, places, things, addictions, as well as she's self-actualizing. What can I say? I'm a big believer in it. It makes, because otherwise I'd be walking around unhappy all the time, and I like being happy. And that's been the difference for me, because you can't do some of the same stupid things anymore. Like when I was 20,
And
can't do those things. I've written about them. I know they're dumb. I'm not gonna walk around like that. What were we gonna say, Terry?
It's just saying she puts a whole other skein on codependence. What codependence, we have a kind of, I guess maybe I have a limited version of what codependence is. But when you finish that book, you're like, whoa. There's a lot of rocks in a codependent world, you know.
Yeah. Well, any other questions or? Yeah, Johnny. A question?
One thing that I noticed, or a thought that I had, was when Carly went down her list of possibilities, the one that struck me the most, I think, was the simplest. And it made me think about how you can take something so simple. And I started to think about 100 ways to make it not simple, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like the details can really turn something that just, this is a pen, but I can tell a story about this pen if I really dig deep enough. I don't know what my point is, but that's what I
Well,
thought.
yes, I love it. And I think one of the great things that Elizabeth Gilbert did, by the time she gets done with this piece of pizza, I'm ready to go to Italy to have a piece of pizza. And I'm not eating carbs right now. So yes, I mean, and we learn a lot of things about her through her eating the pizza. It's such a great way to tell people things. So, great. I'm glad you brought that through. A whole list can tell me a person's story. I can get a whole, I mean, not just me, we can all hear someone's list, and they're all different. We can start to understand and get a glimpse into their world. And I wish everybody could have time to sit and listen to everybody's stories, because when we do, this is just personally important to me, is we stop separating ourselves from others. We start seeing the universality in all of our stories, and that even if we're judgmental of something inside occasionally or a lot, we go, wait a minute, I'm gonna stop that, because now I heard a person's story and they made me understand where that's coming from, so I think it brings us together as people, as human beings, to share in letting go. And thanks, Colleen, for bringing it in. Sometimes our critics come up for ourselves, the worst, and we can let go of those by working in a group and having other people just go, wow, I accept you. I'm hearing stuff you wrote that really sounds good. That's how I got sober too. I mean, 12-step programs, that's what you do. But there's something about writing it that really concretizes it. And just like I wrote that, now I can move on with some different actions. So I just want to share, let me see, email is creativelife1@me.com. Now we are starting a new quarter next quarter. I think, Rusty, you're waiting a little while, but you probably have some things coming up. So if you're more interested in classes during the day, you might want to write Rusty. And if you want to join on a Tuesday or Wednesday evening, early evening here in California, which is 4 and 5 o'clock, Tuesdays and Wednesdays, we are writing. We're going to break some new ground. We're going to work with Elizabeth Gilbert's. Maybe we'll bring in her new book too, just to contrast some of that as inspiration for what we're going to be writing. And we're going to be looking at this. What are you thinking while it's actually happening? And what did you learn from it? Because that's what makes memoir more interesting than the movie. That's why Eat, Pray, Love was better from what I hear from him. I haven't watched the movie, but it's so much better as a book. Even if you love the movie, it's better as a book because you really get into her head. And that's what you can do when you're working with other people and have them witness you. Okay, and Rusty, what do you want to add? How do you want to end things? We don't want to sing Row, Row Your Boat or anything. So.
No, we don't want to do row your boat.
Sometimes I do that in my creativity classes, so you guys should be glad we're not
Yeah.
one of those. Yeah.
Well, just one of the things when sometimes people think that, my story's not anything special, or it's not anything different. Other people have written about cancer, other people have written about being single in their 50s, that no one can write your story the way you can write it, because no one can do what you do the way you do it. And so remember, you are special, you are unique, and your story the way you tell it. And Kurt Vonnegut said it best too, and he talks about Cinderella. Go out, you can make a million like other people with Kurt Vonnegut, write Cinderella. And when I first watched that, I went on a Cinderella movie spree. Okay, guilty. Watched old movies, new movies, black and white movies, animated movies, and they're all different, but they all hook you. It's the people, it's the characteristics, it's the dialogue, it's the nasty tricks the stepsisters play. All of our families, man, we all have our own DNA, we all have our own culture. Everybody is unique. And one thing I wanted to say is I wanted to ask Susan if you wanted to say what you and I both thought about Terry's writing in the group. How you and I both wanted.
Wanted her mother.
Yep, we did. Wanted her mother.
Yep.
That's what Terry told
Oh,
us.
yeah. What a great mother.
Yeah.
Funny.
And that has to do with structure somewhat. I mean, Kurt Vonnegut's video on that is about structure, putting what you've written into an existing, there's only so many structures and you can play with them, but using the structure is a way that you put your hand out to other people and say, come with me.
Yeah.
Because they can understand what you're doing. Whereas when we just write like this, we want to put it into a structure if we want to go out to other people. And it can be a short structure essay, or it can be memoir, but structure, which was the hardest thing for me to learn, but I realize it's not that hard.
So once we know the essential elements, and Kelly and I have been catching each other in those things because it's hard to see for ourselves.
Yeah.
But when we can catch each other, and now we're getting better at seeing what's missing in our own scenes. So the magic of groups is fabulous. Absolutely fabulous. And scenes, like when you were writing subjective, well, there was a lot of subjective writing tonight. It pulls me in because I like being inside your head for a while. If we wrote our whole books that way, I said this in a room, then, our readers might not want to be there. That's where then we need to pull in the objective, the conflict, the opposing forces, and make our point and have an impact on the reader with those universal truths. So subjective is great. Add all the other things and, practice.
And I'll be having a class on Monday nights where I'm just teaching some of that, and probably Rusty, you'll probably want to teach some. So we'll have some classes. We are officially done with the class.